All right, so you're like deep into Wind and Truth. Can you give me, someone who's only halfway through Oathbringer, some kind of like spoiler free, just musings or like thoughts? How are you feeling right now?
Yeah, did you ever see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3?
No,
Oh.
didn't
Well,
want to after I watched the second one.
the
So
start of that movie, the raccoon is sitting on a set of stairs and there's this sad music playing and he's looking very contemplative about life. I'm pretty sure Creep is actually playing that very, jolly song. And you just get
yeah.
this feeling like something is about to happen.
Oh no.
And I don't know if I'm going to feel very good about it. And then you watch the whole movie and you're like, yeah, that's exactly what I was expecting. That's where I'm at with Wind and Truth. It starts off and you're like, okay, there's a lot of closure stuff happening right now. What are we about to really get into?
Oh no.
And yeah, so emotionally,
People
I'm a
are
little
gonna
all
get
over the
hurt.
place. And I
You
don't
could
know
turn
if
your
I've gotten
gain
to
down
the-
just a little bit, by the way.
Yeah,
Just like as
absolutely.
coach.
Yeah, I
I
was.
still want to hear more. That's
I
perfect.
was sweet. But yeah, it's been a lot. It is dense with
Yeah.
Cosmere information. To the point where my eyes start to glaze over a little bit here in the thick of it, but I think it'll get back to the more interesting stuff pretty soon. But overall, great experience. I'm very curious to see where things go. Daniel, have you finished Wind and Truth already?
Yeah, I didn't end up loving it. It
Mhm.
had like the strengths that a lot of Cosmere stuff does,
Yeah.
but at the same time, Sanderson, I don't know what made him decide to use the language he did in this book. There is like a clear change of language where he's like using words like therapy has been memed online and stuff a lot. And saying like something along the lines of like, let's go kick some ass. And it's really that hurt the experience for me. Like writing, I think a lot of people can just kind of shrug that off. It bugged the heck out of me.
My
But
buddy Jack was saying the exact same thing. Actually, he had finished it pretty fast, and he was like, "It's the language is just kind of bizarre." And I try to give him the benefit of the doubt that I think there is an element to this story that, with the way that people can travel through the Cosmere, we're getting introduced to a bunch of stuff that didn't make sense before. That
Yeah.
might make a lot more sense knowing that people have just been coming and going through Roshar for who knows how long from all kinds of different timelines, where some of that language may have made more sense. But there is this element that, Kaladin has kind of invented therapy.
Not to get into spoilers for Evan, but yeah, there's literally like the
I
invention
mean, that's not
of
much of
therapy.
a spoiler. Like I could see the breadcrumbs leading to that, like, from what I've already read, for sure.
And maybe like it is a book that certainly, if we get greater Cosmere context, certain things could like in the long vision actually be pretty neat. But for the reading experience of the book itself, I struggled with it in a lot of different ways. That being said, it might have one of my favorite Cosmere sections ever, which is just everything Adolin. I think it's Adolin's best book by a mile. And I liked the Asana stuff, which I seem to be in a pretty small minority there, because I've seen a lot of people trashing it on the Cosmere subreddit and everything.
Wow.
But I'm always a Sander fan, but this is one of his first books that I just was like, I don't understand the decision making necessarily. And especially like my standard going into it was like Memory of Light. I'm like, this is the guy who finished Wheel of Time. This is his opportunity to do the same thing. And I think I had the bar too high.
Is it not Memory of Light? Like,
I would not say
Okay.
it's like Memory of Light almost in any way. There's a lot of battling, but aside
Sure,
from that, I
yeah.
mean, Memory of Light, it felt like the earth could literally fall apart. It does not hit that. Like,
man, I
scale.
was like, I have a specific memory of reading Memory of Light. I was like in the back of a van, playing some shows, traveling around, and I was like weeping in the back seat, and like the other guys I was with were just like, what the fuck is going on with him back there? Like because they didn't know what the Wheel of Time was. They didn't know I had just read 13 books, and now I'm in the last one, and it's just this one long battle, and I've put so much time into this and spent so much time with these characters, and now it's all ending, and I'm just sitting back there like listening to the Skyrim soundtrack and like reading this and just tears coming down.
It's so funny to me that of all the reasons for a musician to be crying in the back of a van,
I've cried lots more times. Yeah.
There's probably like
way different reasons.
You're probably the last person they would ask, like, hey, why are you crying? Like most musicians, you walk by them crying, you're like, oh yeah, he's doing the music thing.
Well, he's trying to make that work. Yeah, it doesn't work. Give up on your dreams, kids.
What I will say, sorry. What I
please.
did want to say just about the experience with Wind and Truth and the Stormlight Archive in general, because I reread all the books again and through like September to December. It took me forever and I was deep into it.
Quick, actually.
It felt way faster
quick.
than the first time I read it. It took me years to catch up to the Stormlight Archive. But in reading it again, one thing that I can appreciate is that the first and second book are truly, truly as special as I remember them being.
Yeah.
That was my main concern doing the reread, and that I was like, oh, are these actually going to suck now that I've actually read other fantasy stuff? Because the Stormlight Archive was actually my very first epic fantasy series to ever read. Like The Way of Kings was the very first like book over like 200 pages that I decided to read.
Whoa.
So
interesting.
It was a very insane experience, but obviously for me back then, I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever read. And so going back to reread it again, I was like, I've read some other stuff. I read a lot of other authors, this far in. I hope it still holds up to it. I hope I'm not about to tarnish my memory of these books. And I can luckily say that, no, those books are still incredible. And what he did in The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance and Oathbringer was really, really special. What I will say about When in Truth, though, and some of the books after, somewhat in Oathbringer and then towards this book and the secret novels, there was, I think, a point where Brandon Sanderson decided that he really wanted people to know exactly what he was trying to say with every single thing when it comes to these different concepts that he's approaching in the book. Whereas in The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance, there's a lot of showing without telling. And as you get into Rhythm of War to an extent, and then especially in Wind of Truth, a lot of it is a lot of exposition detailing every single thought that a person is having about a particular theme, whether that be mental health, what the right thing to do is, honor. Like those are themes that we had in the book that we got to explore through people's actions, whereas a lot of it has become conversational and a little bit didactic, I think, throughout those writings, especially in some of the secret novels, where that seemed to be something I thought he was doing just to have a lot of fun. Like, he's speaking through these different narrators who can kind of explain things on a deeper level to a younger audience in books like Test of the Emerald Sea and what was the other one that Yumi and the Nightmare Painter?
Yumi, yeah.
And then Sunlit Man, which is like Stormlight 0.5.
I haven't read Sunlit Man.
I haven't read that one yet either.
Yeah, I've heard that you're supposed to read it before Wind and Truth, actually.
I 100% agree with what you're saying, and I way more excused it in the secret novels because I just assumed he wanted each of these to be a possible entry point. So I'm like, okay, he's explaining it all so much because they were, every single one of them except for arguably Sunlit Man, something you can consume completely on its own.
Absolutely.
And so I was just thinking, oh, this isn't a style change for him. And then reading Wind of Truth was like shocking because it's like, whoa, why are you actually explaining to me? Like, I think Kaladin out loud at one point says, you still did something wrong, but you have mental health issues, which doesn't excuse it, but it makes it more understandable. And I was like,
that's like a direct quote from a person in a fantasy book.
Oh, come on, really? Is that-
yes, like directly. And I'm like, dude, what? This is not high school psychology.
Yeah.
So I had read a little bit about I've just been reading kind of like spoiler free type conversations, some of them on Reddit. So I've seen some stuff on YouTube and TikTok and stuff. But one thing that I keep seeing over and over again is people are speculating that Sanderson's editor or editors kind of hung back a little bit. They've started to hang back a little bit and just kind of like let him do his thing. And do you feeling that as well?
He directly addressed that on Reddit recently. And said
cool.
No. He said no.
Sweet.
This is
like,
I'm in no position to tell him aside from my experience. It sure feels like a different edit, but like I have no right to tell him like nuh-uh.
It's cool to have it like totally confirmed that that's not the case actually, because I was seeing a lot of speculation. I just didn't see Sanderson's post. That's
Every time
interesting.
Sanderson posts anywhere, it gets sent to me 900 times. This is news. Cover it. But no,
And I do.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. And I will say, for what it's worth, I do like the messages that he's trying to get across. I do like the character progressions that we have for all of these characters. I agree. The Adolin storyline, I'm only 50% of the way through the book, but the Adolin storyline so far is my favorite. Just what he's exploring on his own feels like the best of the best of what we're getting in this novel. But it is just getting a bit heavy-handed, which I think I could probably chalk up to just the otherworldly level of fame that these books are getting at this stage while he was writing this specific book. The type of audience he's been speaking to over the past few years, and probably being very, very self-aware of the different conversations that happen around what he really means in his books. I think at a certain level as an author, you can fall victim to just wanting to make sure that your message is coming across as clear as possible. And then sometimes it just doesn't work out in the best ways in the writing. But I'm very curious to see how the rest of it goes for sure.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, I mean, you had mentioned earlier about the fifth book having a lot of Cosmere heavy parts to it. Do you mean like he's digging even deeper into like the lore and like backstory, or is he branching into like, without spoiling too much?
Well,
for
Vin
people who've
shows
never...
up with Wax and Wayne while the Captain America theme plays, and
he says Kaladin on your
you
left.
said Vin shows up, and I was like, dude, please don't spoil that for me. Daniel. But like, because I felt that a little bit, and I'm rereading Oathbringer right now, and it's been a little bit. I read it when it came out. 2017, 2018 or something like that. And so I've forgotten a decent amount of it. And I did forget, like, there's just a lot of, all right, we're talking about this thing. There's always like a "the" in front of a capitalized word, and there's like 16 of them in one paragraph. And I'm like trying to parse what's what. Like there's things that some characters know about, and it's very clear that they know everything about this. And then there's like another character that knows nothing. So they're like explaining all of it to them. And then, me basically. Is it a lot more of that kind of stuff too?
You go right ahead.
It's a mix of all that, I think. I mean, as far as asking, does it go deeper into the lore? Quite literally, yes. Like as far as, that's a big portion of this book, I think, is explaining the Cosmere and showing certain things, at least from the perspective of Roshar and the things that have happened on that planet. So
which
that is a big
interesting.
element.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, Roshar is just really fascinating on its own.
And I think the rejection we're kind of seeing from some fans, like I do want to point out, this still is a highly rated book on Goodreads. Like I'm not trying to say like we're the de facto. Like,
people seem on the whole pretty happy about it.
Yeah, like I think it was a fun time, but what I think is frustrating a lot of people is usually a book series grows up with its audience. This oddly felt like it grew down. Like it felt like it was shooting for a younger audience all of a sudden. And I'm like, whoa, it's not YA by any means, but like when you explain themes, use more simple language, and then at the same time are doing this lore stuff, it's a really strange mix. It's just kind of odd. And so that's why I phrased it as like, I just am a bit confused.
Does it feel like the characters, we can move on to other stuff obviously, but like I'm just really curious about this, like and I'll find out for myself, but does it feel like the characters have been assassinated in any way? Like are they still consistent with
still awesome?
That's awesome.
Still great.
Okay, cool.
And and I also want to clarify that I'm loving it so far. Like it's definitely not, at this point, it's not in contention as one of my favorite Stormlight books. Like there's just others that emotionally have me captivated, but this one still I'm enjoying for the most part. It's just, that's one thing that I've been tracking as a thread throughout all the books up to this point, and it's definitely come to a head, I think, in this one as far as the change in writing style and his approach to the book. But overall, the story is very interesting. The characters you love are right there on the front page, and you get some really interesting storylines, I think, from characters I didn't think I was going to hear from again. So definitely much to look forward to anybody who hasn't read the book yet. And while we kind of jumped straight to the things that I had issue with, there's still so much to love about it. That's the spicy
stuff. That's what I like to hear about, because it is such a ridiculously popular series. And, hearing some of these like really honest opinions about it is really refreshing.
Yeah. Well, and I do want to also, if I'm going to end on a positive note, it does have maybe the most intense, like Sanderson put it in avalanche mode, let's go endings, and I don't want to spoil anything along that, obviously. But if you are someone who's here for the Sanderlanche, he lanches all over everybody.
Okay, another thing that I hope isn't a spoiler. Did it end in a cliffhanger which made you feel like, I can't believe we're not getting more books for another like 6 or 7 years? Because didn't he say that he's going to take a pretty substantial break?
It's yes and no. I think it actually ends in a way. Like, my favorite part of the book is the ending, because it set everything up so that I'm really curious where this world is going to go next. But I feel like I got the answers to the characters that I wanted.
Oh, that's so relieving to hear. Yeah, man, that's really cool.
Which is why I still rated it like a 7. Because for me, like, one of the big things a sequel's got to do, if it's the middle of a series, is make me want to go for the next book. And despite all the complaints I had, oh my God, do I want the next book?
It's going to be quite the wait.
Yeah. But what are you all reading right now?
Right now, like I said, halfway through Wind and Truth. I'm not very good at reading multiple books at one time, but I'm trying to read Water Moon by Samantha Soto Yambao. It's actually a book I was given the pleasure of getting an early copy for. It's a fantasy / fiction book. It's kind of like a magical realism, honestly. It's giving a lot of like Miyazaki film meets, kind of a slow burn romance. It's got some really cool themes to it. And I'm only like 30% of the way through that. It comes out this month, actually. And I'm excited to get through the rest of it so I can, have better opinions about it. But it's been a good time so far. It just unfortunately landed at the same time I'm trying to burn through a bajillion page novel. So.
Waterman's getting a lot of hype right now. Like, people seem really excited about it.
When you talk about the Miyazaki-esque kind of approach, is that more atmospheric, or like with the characters and story? Like, what is giving you that taste?
I think it probably doesn't hit on that level with the dialogue and the characters, but the magical elements of the story are very, very interesting. Just to give a brief synopsis, it's essentially a young girl and her father run a pawn shop in this alternate reality that people with regrets about their life walk into unknowingly, and they can trade away the thing they regret to not have that regret anymore. So they walk out forgetting it ever happened, and they keep those regrets and sell them to these mythical beings. And there's a big punishment if you don't keep the thing, or if you try to use the person's regret. And yeah, it just has a lot going on there. Yeah.
Wait, it's like the mystical shop you make the deal with the devil with, but it's from that perspective. That's so cool.
Yeah. And so they live in this world, and then, of course, someone shows up who's not of that world, and there's this big adventure, and you have this outsider who's trying to learn all these things, very much like Spirited Away, when she just kind of goes into that universe and is trying to learn everything. As a reader, you're kind of doing the same thing. It's very beautiful so far. I enjoy the writing. It's a pretty short read. I think it's only like 250, 280 pages or something like that. Nothing too crazy. And the cover art is beautiful. If I can find it somewhere over here. I have a giant stack of books.
And now I'm going to want to know who the cover artist is.
The cover is really, really cool. Like, it sticks out.
I haven't even heard of this yet.
Oh, really? Yeah, I've been seeing it on a lot of like anticipated for 2025 lists.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, even the cover does give it's giving a little bit of Spirited Away.
Is this cozy fantasy, or would you say no, not cozy?
There's it's a bit violent for something that's cozy fantasy. There's like cozy parts of it where they're like, traveling through this really cool world. They're, going to different parts of the universe through these little ponds. But then there's like these definitely super evil things that are trying to chase people down. And yeah, there's definitely some consequences that don't make you feel so cozy.
Well, I actually, that's a really cool, Evan, I want to get to what you're reading in a minute, but there's a news story that I covered recently that I thought was so interesting. And like the big daddy in the cozy fantasy space is obviously Travis Baldry's Legends and Lattes.
Mm-hmm.
And he just said that the third book is not going to be cozy. Like, he's like, there's violence, there's going to be this stuff.
Let's go.
And I'm so interested on how, I've never seen a cozy fantasy do that. So I really want to see how the audience reception to that kind of like genre turn is going to go down. I mean, he's a really talented author. I hope it goes well, but I was like kind of excited for book 3. And now I'm really like, oh my God, I want to see this like orc I've come to love, who's like, so peaceful, suddenly bash heads in.
Dang, is there a TV show or like movie equivalent to that, as far as something that started off maybe in one genre and just grew into a completely different genre, or something that even started off as maybe like a young adult or kids show, and then next thing you know,
I
there's
mean, I
mass
guess you could
murders.
say like Harry Potter gets pretty
Oh.
like, I mean, if you compare like the fifth
Mhm.
book to the first book, like the first book's just
Yeah.
like a cozy mystery, you know.
That's true.
And then, you know, people are dying, people are, you know, snogging or whatever, like and I mean things are
pretty
getting
violent there.
well, and like you know, like the stakes where, you know, Harry basically finds out like he's gonna die, you know,
Mhm.
or he's probably gonna die, you know, like those get pretty heavy, and like, you know, Cedric gets killed and stuff.
Mhm.
So I mean, as far as like genre switching, I can't really think of much, but that's like
No.
the first thing that came off the top of my head for things getting way more intense.
I can't really think. I even just Googled, and I'm not seeing many people mention that kind of pivot. Someone brought American Werewolf in London. I mean, kind of, but no, like nothing that's like really a blanket, and then suddenly that blanket's made of flesh. Like there's not that that hardcore of a turn.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
But
think
you all,
it sounds like something that, you know, not to just keep circling back to Brandon Sanderson, but it does sound like something that he is trying to do with the Mistborn series, as far as, and even Stormlight to a degree, as far as starting off in fantasy and hoping to finish both of those series in kind of like a sci-fi
Yeah.
type world, which those two genres are probably the easiest to transition between.
it's just been done so much. You know, there's so much sci fantasy out there.
Mhm.
So Evan, what are you currently burning through?
So I'm about halfway through Oathbringer, really enjoying myself. I think, you know, like the second read through, or I mean, I guess I've read the first two books like, I don't know, four times or something. But the second read of Oathbringer, I'm really enjoying myself, kind of like knowing what I'm headed for. And I mean, excited for Rhythm of War, even though that one seems to be like the kind of unanimously agreed upon like weakest book in the series, like book 4. Did I just say something like totally controversial?
I
You're
don't think
both
so.
like, I don't know.
It's hard to say. At
Sure.
that point, it's all still so close. Like,
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're all, yeah, because like they're all such amazing books, like, you know, rating it like that. But I'm excited to get through Rhythm of War and then get to Win in Truth, and then, you know, move on to some other stuff. But I'm also reading The Reformatory by Tananarive Due, which is really, really good. It's amazing.
I maintain if Rhythm of War had been properly marketed as Die Hard Fantasy version, it would have been much better received because it's Die Hard Fantasy version.
Elaborate on that.
It takes place in a big tower and it's taken over and people fight back stealthily, and that's
so sick, actually.
yeah, like it is that. The only difference is they're not thieves.
Wow.
Sure.
I actually just watched Die Hard for the first time this Christmas with my wife's family, and so I'm glad I get that joke.
You had never seen it up until now?
No, I hadn't.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, the big debate about whether or not it's a Christmas movie, and I was thinking, you know, I need to watch this because I feel like people are just being ironic or, you know, just trying to get a rise out of people when they say that. And I watched it and I was like, no, this is definitely a Christmas movie. And it's funny that you say that Rhythm of War is Die Hard, because on like fantasy steroids, because I feel like Die Hard is just Home Alone on crazy steroids as well. Like, it's literally just the same plot line of Home Alone.
How did I never put that together? They're both from the 80s. Oh my god.
By logical extensions,
Whoa.
what we have concluded here today is Rhythm of War is basically just Home Alone.
Just Home Alone.
Yes, we've done it. That we found the title for this.
I mean, now I'm
episode.
just more excited for Rhythm of War personally. So thanks, guys. The Reformatory by Tananarive Due is definitely, I think it won the World Fantasy Award last year. It's really, really good. It's about like a 12-year-old kid in like 1950s, I want to say, like Florida. He's a black kid who like gets in a fight with a white like landowner, you know, and then gets sent without any trial, no jury, no nothing, you know, Jim Crow, Florida, to this reformatory. And the second he gets there, it's just haunted. You know, like it's not an okay, and it's already bad enough like that this kid is in this situation in the time period that he's in, and then it's just like you just pile on like this horrible haunting to this really terrible school. So yeah, I mean it's a really, really, Tananarive Due is my first of her books, but I definitely want to read more because she's a fantastic writer, really, really, really good.
Is it embracing like because the reformatory schools back then were literally like worse than prisons sometimes. Like they were just awful, and it's kind of leaning into that. So it's like historical realism, fantasy, horror.
Sure.
Novel?
I think it's digging into. Obviously, it's digging into this idea that like segregation was alive and well in this period of time. Even when kids were getting sent to these kinds of schools, even if they were integrated reformatories, it was still like 1,000 times worse for black kids in there and stuff. So it's like you pile like this kid being kind of like sensitive to this haunting. It's just like really, really cool. It's like it bounces between his perspective and his older sister who's trying to get him out of there. It's a fantastic book.
Did either of you read Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride? Because that's what that reminds me of a lot. It does not have the haunting element to it, but essentially it's a very similar scenario in Pennsylvania. A young black boy is deaf in this community that is actually a mixed community of black people and Jewish people. And then like the rich white people live down the hill. And that kid, his parents have passed away. And they're essentially trying to send him to, I guess, what could effectively be a reformatory. They call it a school, but it's really like a crazy house. And terrible things are happening there. And so the crux of the book is around getting him out of there. But there's no ghosts. Just very scary.
It's
real
interesting
people.
How similar those plots are.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did you say the POV is deaf?
Yes. He's he can't hear, and it's weird because he does not know sign language, so all he can do is read lips. And that's like the boy. We actually don't get the story from his perspective, or there's like a third party or a third person narrator kind of telling the story, and we get some of his perspective sometimes, but a lot of it is him trying to figure out what the heck is going on because he cannot hear.
From a writing perspective, that's fascinating to be able to take that.
Very well written. Highly recommend checking it out. But it makes me definitely want to check out this because why not have that plus ghosts?
Yeah, and it really showcases too. It's just how I just read Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi a little bit ago, and kind of the same. Like these kids. Just this one's a church in like rural Pennsylvania, actually, and like early 19th century. I know, right? Yeah, all these similar threads, but like what I'm really bringing home with me, among many things, is just how horrible adults can be. Like they're like, even when they're in charge, it's like they might as well not be. They're just making everything worse. They don't listen to kids. So I really am enjoying that a lot. I'm also I'm rereading 11/22/63 right now.
Love that book.
I don't know why. I just like picked it up and started reading it and didn't stop. And man, it's amazing. Yeah. Like it's such a good book. It's long. It's really, really long.
I've never heard anyone say they didn't like it for how long it was, and all the people I've known I've never read it yet, or I've never read it, and I would like to, but I am intimidated a little bit. I've actually not read any Stephen King before, as far as the actual book. I've only watched the movie adaptations.
Oh wow! Yeah, it's not a good place to start King, in my opinion. I don't
like. I think it's the best thing, and people might disagree with me on this, but I think it's the best Stephen King book from like post-accident Stephen King. I hope that's not like too macabre to like have his accident like be where I'm not saying it has anything to do with it, but it's just like post year 2000. I feel like King's writing, like there's some definite like Revival is really amazing. Like I really love that book, and I thought Fairy Tale was really good. I'm reading. I just started the Bill Hodges trilogy today, actually, which is interesting. So now I'm just reading a bunch of Stephen King, but I would say I would agree with Daniel. I mean, like 11/22/63 is an amazing book, but I would definitely start with I don't know.
My go-to is Pet Sematary.
Pet Sematary is really, really good. That's like one of my favorites. Either Pet Sematary. I think Salem's Lot is a pretty solid spot if you're looking for like a good, just solid like vampire book. Don't
watch any of the adaptations. They're all god awful.
I just watched the new one and it was so bad.
The new one is like genuinely maybe the worst thing I watched last year. It's
excellent.
I tried. I started watching it and then stopped, and then the next day I was like, let's try this again. Like we'll pick up where we left off, and I couldn't even get through to the end. I couldn't limp my way through.
It's not like it's so bad it's interesting. The reason it's so horrible, it is the most bland lifeless adaptation you could do of a vampire movie. Like
a good one, a good vampire story.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because like the crux of the story. Oh my god, we should talk about Nosferatu.
Have you seen it?
Yeah. Have you?
Well, I haven't seen it yet. I think I'm gonna go see it next week.
It's so fucking good.
But I've been reading threads about it, and people have obviously been talking a lot about that and how great it is, and then comparing it to just other vampire stories and adaptations. And so that's where I most recently heard about Salem's Lot and people recommending that. But tell me more. You know, what do I need to know about going into Nosferatu or even Salem's Lot here, or vampire stories in general?
Yeah.
So I recently went through a really shitty breakup, and I don't live in a city with any of my family, so just kind of alone a lot of the time. And
unrelated to the vampire story, that's just
I'm getting there. Okay, I'm getting there. I'm setting the scene here. So
excellent.
I just keep hinting to Daniel that I'm single, like over and over again. I'll just keep plugging away. I know you're engaged, man, but engaged ain't married. Okay, so anyway, so I had like tentative plans to go see it with somebody, but they fell through. It was Christmas night, so like I wasn't really expecting, someone to like bail on their family. But anyway, I didn't think I was going to go alone, is the point that I was trying to make. But I did go alone. And I bought a big popcorn, and I bought soda, and I forgot about my popcorn and soda because my mouth was clenched the entire time I was watching Nosferatu. Because it is that movie does not give a fuck about you. Like it's just like from the second it starts, it's just like, oh, hope you don't mind really fucked up shit. Hope you don't mind like really disgusting, really dark, really messed up. Oh, yep, it's just sad. The movie's just really sad.
So
so good.
And so that's a selling point for
the reason it's a selling point for me is because like it's so refreshing to see something that's just like, the reason I say it doesn't give a fuck is because I'm not trying to like say like all these trends in Hollywood and everything. I don't work in Hollywood. I don't know the real deep ins and outs of it, but I will say that typically 99% of movies have a resolution. There's something to walk away from it with. And like this one was just like, nope, it's really sad, and that's
we're gonna go now.
It's horror, like it's a tragedy, like it's based on some really horrific stuff in the movies, and it's a good take on it. And Robert Eggers is just, he did The Witch, The Lighthouse. Mm-hmm. I still haven't seen The Northman.
The Northman's good. He's one of those directors who's getting to work right now where he really just gets to make what he wants. Like, there's like the Tarantino made whatever he wanted. Jordan Peele's making whatever he wanted. Now Robert Eggers is making just whatever he wants because it'll make money.
Denis Villeneuve,
great example.
Throwing names out.
And I one of my favorite things I love all kinds of different, vampire interpretations. I fucking enjoy Twilight because why not? It's fun.
Yeah.
Like I will read that any day. But it felt like the most accurate vampire from Dracula I've ever seen on screen because it is perverted, because it is using some magic. It is like tapping into that more like primal fear that I think vampires are more rooted in. And I love, especially when vampires do have agency beyond just, I want to suck blood. And instead they're more demonic. They feel like a product of Satan. Yeah. And this feels like it's a product of Satan. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the one thing I heard is that like bringing evil villains back, like this creature is just actually very evil and wants to do bad things.
Well, more than just the main characters suffer through the process of what's going on too, which I think really enhances how evil everything feels. Oh, wow. Like it, obviously you're with these main characters throughout what's going on, but then also this is taking place in a place where other people live and they're affected by this, and like Nosferatu doesn't care, obviously, like Orlok, I should say, doesn't care. It's not like, oh, sorry, I made things inconvenient for you.
That's the sequel I want. I want a socially anxious Nosferatu follow up where he's just very apologetic the whole time.
Well, I'm really just focused on this one woman. I'm sorry to ruffle any feathers. I'm not trying to make waves here. No, I would suggest still like don't wait for it to come to streaming. Go see it in theaters. See it in a dark room with other people. I heard people gasp around me. It really added to the experience.
Did you have any gigglers in your theater? Either of you? I've seen that online too. That people are like laughing a lot in the movie.
Well, and I
It's
get
nervous
it.
energy, I think.
Exactly. I was just about to say, like, I think that some of it's nervous energy, and then some of it, like, there are just kind of like, it's just a weird movie,
Yeah.
you know? I mean, like,
sometimes you got to laugh through it to.
Yeah, but there were some like genuinely like really. There's like one scene, not even a scene. There's like one like 15-second moment, which I think Daniel might know what I'm talking about. There was just the audio of it was so disgusting.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
Daniel, yep. And it's like, and it went on like 30% longer than it needed to, which I think was an intentional thing that the editor or director or whoever, they did it on purpose. They lengthened that just past the point where you're like, okay, oh my God, I don't want to see this anymore. Wow. But in the theater, it had gone on long enough that people started laughing, and it kind of like broke it a little bit for me. So, I mean, that's just what you get from, going to it.
I also feel like comedy cuts and horror cuts are very similar to the edit. Sure. And I feel like some stuff, like there's people who like laughed when it cut to Lily Rose Depp at one point and she was in like a horrific pose. But I get if you're like, it can also make you kind of go like, ha ha ha. Like,
it was nervous laughter for sure. Like,
and there's, I want to say specifically, so have you guys seen The Witch by chance? The VVITCH?
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Was it pronounced that way? I always call it
it's just The Witch.
It's VV.
It's spelled with two V's. I've seen it, but I never knew. I like it. The Witch.
But to me, it's his best atmosphere work since that movie. That's still like maybe the most atmospheric movie I've ever watched.
That freaking goat, man.
Dude.
Yeah. Talk about an ending you don't see coming. I thought they were going to turn out to be crazy, and like the witch at the beginning was the only thing, but then all of a sudden the goat turns into Satan.
Yep. Yeah, he does. Spoiler for anybody that hasn't seen The Witch, but
it's 10 years old.
You should have seen it by now. But I still think, like, I love Nosferatu. I really did. I think I like The Witch just like 5% more.
Yeah.
I think The Witch just like Daniel was saying, like the atmosphere. The locality of it, like it's in like this one spot with this one family, and it's just, I don't know, for me personally, it just kind of like really ramps up the intensity, because you're seeing this family just kind of go at each other, and there's just like this kind of ever present, like kind of creeping dread that you don't really know where it's coming from. It's coming from the barn. But
the goat, actually.
It's coming from the goat for sure.
I wanted to make a YouTube video skit where I was a salesman using my green screen, just trying to do like door-to-door sales to the house in Witch, and I really thought it'd be like hilarious to like show up like the kids convulsing.
Still needed it, actually. It's not too late.
Like Cutco knives, but I don't think I just would require so much editing, and it's one of those things where it's like I'm not sure if that would actually be
that
funny.
in my head. I'm laughing, like thinking of that.
You got me sold.
Yeah, that's a lot of editing, though.
Yeah.
Can you get away with that? Like, I don't really work on YouTube very much, but what's the deal with like cutting up clips of movies, and is that like fine as long as
it's gotten
you're
a
talking?
lot more lax in recent years. I feel like YouTube's finally pushing back on people who have been spamming strikes on channels. My fantasy awards got hit, but that's because I put music in. Music is still just a no.
What music did you use?
I used the Dandadan trailer. Music.
Sick song right there. Right?
It's such a good song.
I still haven't watched Dandadan. Is that like something
I just caught up? So
is it solid? I've heard it's really weird.
Oh gosh, it's so strange. Do not watch it with the sun out. Do not watch it in front on the airplane. Like it's
don't watch it on an airplane.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Damn.
You'll see a high school girl stripped into her underwear, episode 1, and you're like, all right, this is gonna be Japanese weird. Let's go. Like,
oh my goodness.
But I think it's trying to say that that's weird at the same time.
Yes.
So it's kind of like
it's remarkably self-aware.
So from somebody who's, I haven't even seen like a screenshot or anything of it. Like, is it like Junji Ito weird, or is it like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure weird? Anymore. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Maybe like JoJo's. Honestly, for the most part, like I'd say 95% of it is really just a really fun, awesome story that's hilarious for the most part. Yeah. But the hilarity does involve like mild weirdness with these middle schoolers. But that's kind of like, the point of it is that it's weird. It's like, why is this happening to these kids? Okay. And the music is great and the animation is amazing.
Okay.
I would just check it out and you would feel it. You know it. You'd be like, okay, I get what people are saying. Because people told me the same things when I went to go watch it. And I was like, okay, we'll see what happens. Oh, this is great. whoa, this is very weird.
Okay. Hopefully they
Great.
cover their tracks there. That was really odd.
And I found it to have the sexiest grandma that's ever been.
So happy you said grandma. So fucking stoked that you said grandma.
Oh, man.
My heart skipped
our
a beat, man.
career
I was like,
yeah, we're all hanging on that one.
But no, I said in the fantasy awards, and I maintain I almost quit after every episode, but I had to keep going because it actually is like really compelling, the conflict as well. Eventually the relationship between the protagonists won me over. And I honestly, because I'm all caught up on One Piece, I'm all caught up on Berserk, I'm all caught up on like a bunch of my favorite manga and anime. So it's just, I need something to like fill it. And it turns out Dandadan's one of my probably my favorite favorite anime I've seen since Frieren.
Since what?
Yeah.
Frieren?
I don't really watch anime, so I'm curious.
Oh, Frieren is amazing. Oh my
How's it
gosh.
spelled?
If you want to search FR, I get the vowels mixed up here, but like FREIREN or something like that.
Yes, I'm dyslexic. I'm not going to be able to help you out at all.
Beyond Journey's End.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I think one of my friends was telling me about this.
Yeah, fuck Evan. You and I can talk about it because it's amazing.
That's fine. Good.
I think Frieren might be my favorite fantasy story I consumed in 2024.
That would be
like
easy.
books included.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
If Frieren was a book, people would be all
It's
over
a
it.
manga. It looks like,
It's got this
yeah, that's
amazing.
true.
but it's not.
So like
Not prose book. Yeah.
the whole premise is you are following an immortal elf who is very detached from the reality because time moves differently for them. And because of that, structurally throughout the show, time moves differently. Characters just drop the fact that like 6 years have gone by and you're like, oh, damn. But at the same time, the character work is all about how this character realizes how much regret they have not cherishing the time they had with the people around them who are humans and just dying. And it's just
Cool.
it's genuinely like poetic in its structure and its storytelling. Absolutely adore it. And the male main character looks a lot like Rand Thor. And no one else was saying that. And I pointed it out. And now a lot of people are like, oh, fuck yeah, that's Rand.
Is it finished? Like, can I? Are there more
is-
seasons? Oh, so season 1 is done. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the idea that there's just Frieren's kind of getting over this regret after her first round of lives she's lived through, and trying to repair that with the new humans that she interacts with, and is able to kind of grab hold of some kind of meaning in life and meaning in relationships is really special. In the same way that, like, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie About Time. I know we're jumping all over the place here, but About Time is a movie. There's like the redheaded guy who is one of the Weasley brothers in Harry Potter and also is like one of the evil people from the latest trilogy of Star Wars. And then Rachel McAdams are in this relationship, but that guy can travel through time. And the point of that story is, you don't need to travel through time to appreciate the life you have. It's kind of the same thing with Frieren in that, we don't get a chance to live forever and do right by the relationships that we have. So we should probably take care of the ones that we have right now. And I thought it was just very special, on top of having some of the best animation I think I've ever seen and some really kick-ass battle scenes.
I want to talk about so much with you, but I don't want to spoil stuff for Evan.
No, I really want to. I mean, like, I was gonna start. Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Oh gosh.
Should I watch Frieren instead?
Depends on what kind of mood you're in. I know.
Yeah, I know.
Sounds
right?
like
Yeah.
Life-wise, things are kind of.
Yeah, that's like, oh shit.
Hey, we're picking back up, man. We're so back.
You're like, oh,
We're so back.
We're so back. We're all right.
So I watched Saving Private Ryan or Eraserhead. Well, what mood are you in?
I don't know. Like, I don't. I've heard that Evangelion is like really sad, like really like
and
depressing
weird.
And weird. Also, yeah, that's fine.
I also kind of like how Frieren at the same time has a little bit of fun, very deliberately, I feel like, and I won't get into details about the ending, but with the Superman problem, because she is like a 1,000-year-old elf wizard, right? She's level maxed out. And it's even like a joke at one point that she needs to get a qualification to do something. And she's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like,
It's just like the oldest elf ever.
yeah. And so like the conflict never comes from like, is she going to be strong enough to do this? And instead it's every bit of conflict comes from either the pupils she has, or it's like about perspective. Like one of the biggest takedowns she has of like one of the most powerful people is just walking up to them and showing them that she's stronger with an aura and being like, I win.
Yeah,
And
she's aura arms right in front of him, and that's just the end of it.
I don't know. I think it handles every facet of its storytelling is interesting. Conflict, characters, structure, time. It's really refreshing, especially if you're done with like this typical hero's journey formula.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel, what are you reading right now?
Oh, I'm in the middle of the Dandelion Dynasty. Have you all read it?
No.
Oh, it's Ken Liu's series, Grace of Kings, Wall of Storms. I just finished Wall of Storms, and it is so it's not like 10 books or anything. I think it's 4. In fact, I know
it's all wrapped up too. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's done. And it's not like the longest or most epic fantasy series, but it is telling the story of a dynasty. Like, so it is really zoomed out on that macro level, and like there are entire sections that are just telling you historical events happening over the stretch of time. And it's the first 2 books are both like above an 8 for me. Like, they are magnificent.
Wow.
It covers themes of like technology, contact with other cultures, cultural diffusion, royal families. And then the whole first book is actually like 2 books in one, because there's the initial, like them coming up from the bottom to fight against like a bad guy. But then the second half of the book is about schism between friends and how like power is going to change you. You don't want to fight your friend, but oh my god, you end up on the different sides of this thing and it's irresolvable. And I'm going to be doing a Sun Eater 1 hour style like deep dive walk through it. It's so inspiring to me.
Wow.
I'm so happy too, because I've had some real misses recently in my reads. I actually just DNF'd something which I normally do.
You don't normally DNF stuff?
Yeah, I try to finish everything I pick up, just because I don't know if I'm going to give a negative review. I want to give a negative review. I don't want to only put out positives, no matter how painful that can come. Starter villain.
I was just recommending that book to my wife today from just a third person recommendation. Like, I hear people talking about it if you're interested, but
everything I've read by Scalzi I've really liked.
I've tried 3 John Scalzi books, guys. Every single one has been like a sandpaper enema. I am not vibing with that guy's
What about
so that means you don't like it, right?
No, I was gonna say, like, I think Scalzi would at least like that comparison.
I get his appeal, but he has a heavy reliance, especially on the sense of humor. Isn't this crazy right now? And I never find that funny. And
Did you read Old Man's War?
Yes, but I barely remember it. And
interesting. I really liked it a lot. Yeah,
like a 6. I was like, it was the best thing I've read by him, but I still didn't love it. Yeah, right now I'm on a Ken Liu kick, and I'm about to pick up James Toulos and I are making content together, and he recommended I check out Hell's Gate, and then we're going to do like a dual review where I talk about Hell's Gate, and then he's going to talk about Canticle for Leibowitz, which I recommended for him.
That's an old one.
Yeah, Canticle for Leibowitz is a post-apocalyptic religious sci-fi book. Not religious, but like commentary on religion, and it is an underspoken about, but it is certainly a classic.
Looks like Hell's Gate is the first book in a trilogy by David Weber.
Yeah.
Weber.
I think it's an alt history book. I could be mistaken.
Oh, I see. I wanted to circle back. You had mentioned Empire of Silence. You're planning on doing a big review of that. And Evan, have you read that yet?
No, that's like my big 2025 series that I want to read.
No, yeah, I was saying I was going to do a style. I already did like a really long thing for gotcha. Sun Eater, and now I'm going to try and do a similar thing for Ken Liu. But have you read Sun Eater?
I read the first book, and I started Howling Dark, and then realized I was like, if I keep going, I'm not going to get to Win in Truth. So I have to put this down. Very, very good, though.
Yeah, I'm excited as hell for Sun Eater. I mean, I think Sun Eater definitely is like the longest thing I want to. I really want to read Anthony Ryan's Covenant of Steel. I really like Anthony Ryan a lot. The first book is.
Never heard of him.
Oh yeah, he wrote Blood Song, which is like one of my favorite fantasy. It's like what Name of the Wind wishes it was. Like I really like Blood Song a lot. Just read it as a standalone. Like the books after Blood Song are like. I don't know what he was doing, but it's it's his books, so whatever. But like Covenant of Steel for sure is like one of the other big ones. I do want to read Murderbot too.
Oh, Murderbot is
because I've read the
brilliant.
first one, but I was reading The Expanse while I was reading Murderbot, and I was just getting my sci-fi wires crossed, so I wanted to put that down for a second. Then another one that I really want to get to, I'm finally going to read Evan Winter's Rage of Dragons, or is that the first one?
Same, yeah. I've got that on my
because
TBR list soon.
So my motivation to read it kind of like dipped a little bit because I thought that the third book was the last one and that it was coming out like last year. And then I found out, please correct me if I'm wrong, either in the comments or one of you two, but I've heard that The Burning is now going to be 4 books, and we still haven't seen when the third one's coming out. But I've heard that first book is like incredible, like really, really good. Daniel, have you read it?
Yeah, I've read the first 2, and then I just haven't kept up on the series since then because I knew it was going to be a bit of a wait.
Yeah.
It's funny. Go into it knowing that Evan said this in an interview with me, and I think it's fascinating. He conceived and wrote the book wanting it to be adapted, so it's like structurally and everything written in a way where it's supposed to be very adaptable. Because he worked in filmmaking and stuff before he was an author.
That's
I think
interesting.
he was a director on some stuff too, like maybe commercials.
Oh, cool.
Don't quote me on that. I'm half remembering an interview from like 4 years ago. But he's a really interesting guy, and I think his approach to that series had extreme benefits. I think, and also he is so knowledgeable on how to market a book. He did a wonderful job of getting that book in the right people's hands. Really influenced me early on, like trying to become an author. But I won't spoil anything. But Rage of Dragons lives up to the title.
Fuck yeah.
Dragons getting angry.
The other, while we're on the subject, one last one that I wanted to talk about. I don't know if either of you read these, but another big trilogy that I want to read next year is John Gwynne's Bloodsworn saga.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Finally, a guy
absolutely.
who does shields right.
I'm on the second book.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's it. I'm on the second book. I was almost about to buy the third book today. It's the first book was awesome because I'm just making sure I'm not mixing this. Bloodsworn Saga is going to be Shadow of the Gods, Hunger of the Gods, and Fear of the Gods, right? Yeah. So I read Shadow of the Gods with my book club last year. It was sick. And then I was waiting for the third one to come out before I read the second one and then forgot. So now I have to read both of them. But if you haven't read the first one, highly recommend it. It is so cool.
Comparative to the third book, the first 2 books are light on action. So keep that in mind.
What?
The third book is a bloodbath.
I read Faithful and the Fallen last year, and I didn't love it. Like, I think that like parts of it were really cool. I think especially like the first book and the last book are really solid. I think that the middle just kind of sagged for me. So I was like a little bit hesitant, but that was like the first series that Gwynne did. And there were definitely parts of Faithful and the Fallen that I thought were just like epic as hell, like really, really well done. There's a couple of specifically like battle scenes where it was like, man, this guy mapped this battle out in such an interesting way. And like, I have no idea what to expect. And like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening right now. So really dug that. But yeah, then I heard so much hype for Bloodsworn. Like, I've heard it's just like way better than anything he's put out, which is cool.
Yeah, I actually only read those books because I saw the cover of the third one when it released online. I was like, that is so a giant freaking snake and a tiny boat. I need to know why they're in the same picture together. So,
that's how I felt about Gunmetal Gods, which Daniel, actually, you recommended that to me. I still haven't read it, but the covers of those books are...
It's the same vibe as Bloodsworn Saga, but tentacle monster instead of.
Oh God! I'm looking at it now.
Are those covers wild? I know, right? That's exactly the feeling I got.
Well, to me, I'm curious what your thoughts on this are as well. I love when I immediately was a fan of John Gwynne, but like I didn't love his first book. But he's also an author I've seen aggressively improve. And I always become a bigger fan of an author if I get to see them get better and better and better over time. I saw that with Rebecca Kwong. I maintain that Steven Erikson improved a lot throughout Malazan. And yeah, it kind of becomes like a story along with the story, right? You can see how they hone their craft, and I'm always kind of inspired by that.
I felt like that about Lanius trilogy compared to Will of the Many?
Just about
no
to say.
Way. Yeah.
I was literally looking over to make sure I was going to say James Arlington's name right. I was like, one thing that comes to mind.
Because I mean, I thought Lanius was like pretty cool. Definitely, like, you know, it's kind of beaten to death at this point, this topic, but the ending is really, really cool. Like I really enjoyed the ending of this.
It's actually my favorite trilogy of all time. So,
oh, really? So, like, because I really liked the first book, and then I felt like it got into, like, I felt like I lost my sense of place in the second one, where I just kind of didn't really know like what the issue or the problem was really for a while. And then into the third one, I was like, and then into the third one, I was like, okay, this is all starting to really come together. And then the ending is just, like, what the hell are you doing, man? And then
sobbing at the
it's so crazy. If anyone's listening right now, like, you haven't read Lanius, the whole, like, for me personally, like, the middle of it was a little bit of a slog, but the ending of that book just covers so well for it. And then Will of the Many is just a banger.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people compare that trilogy to Wheel of Time. I read the first one so long ago, I don't remember it.
I wonder if they compare it because Michael Kramer does the audio.
Probably has a lot to do.
I don't know if that's really it, but
I've not read Wheel of Time yet. It's on my forbidden.
It's been nice having you on.
No. I was like, I don't know when I'm going to have to admit that, but I feel like sometime within the hour it's going to come up.
Daniel's the resident Wheel of Time.
We have the whole thing in the library. My wife is like 7 books in right now.
Crown of Swords.
And I was just like, I gotta be able to commit to all those books in one sitting, and I just wasn't ready for it. But I will. But from what I understand about the Wheel of Time, I could see why people say there's a lot of similarities in the Lanius trilogy. But
I'm gonna go with your initial theory. It's likely because Michael Kramer narrates it. Because I've seen people say the same thing about Dandelion Dynasty, and he narrates that. And having done the first 2 books, not at fucking all. Like, they are as different as you could approach an epic as possible. Like, Robert Jordan is down on the earth, like, with his main characters all the time. Ken Liu is like, we're gonna sit with the gods for 10 chapters.
I mean, I will say that, like, if you wanted to parallel Wheel of Time and Lanius, I could see people kind of drawing connections in the sense that the main characters kind of go from a small place to, like, becoming a much more bigger deal in, like, the workings of the world and stuff like that.
Like, every fucking
I'm just trying to
ever. What?
Hey,
small guy in a big world.
Let me cook a little bit here. Okay, so we got a little bit of an entourage, like, ensemble cast, you know, that are friends to begin with, and then together all of them kind of, like, move through these, like, world-ending stakes, which. Yeah, I feel like isn't
Star Wars
every
is exactly
single
like
book.
Wheel of Time, I guess, by that logic. They're the same.
No, because Leia and Han weren't growing up on Tatooine with Luke.
Fair.
Boom.
Okay.
Bam. Right. But I can see that. And then, like, also, I mean, you know, the I don't know. I don't think they're really that similar.
There we go. That's all we
I don't know. I'm not even like a gigantic Wheel of Time fan, but I mean, I'm not as big of a fan as Daniel is. Okay. So but I wanted to say real quick, sorry, but if you are going to read Wheel of Time, there's a lot of conversation that always crops up with Wheel of Time about how, you know, the middle books are horrible, and then Brandon Sanderson, like, swoops in and saves the day, and it's like true. I don't really agree with that, really. Like, I think that I could be wrong because I wasn't reading them as they were coming out, but I imagine that a lot of, like, the kind of, like, vitriol about those middle books is because there was a lot of time between them, and then when you got to the book, it wasn't, like, as epic as, you know, Lord of Chaos, or, you know, it's just, they're just different books, but they're still important books. But if you read them, you know, now that they're all out, if you just kind of, like, read them back to back to back, I don't think you'd even really notice, like, that big of a dip in quality. And then also, like, Knife of Dreams, the last book that Robert Jordan wrote, is really, really solid, you know? So I don't think that it's even, you could even make the argument that Sanderson, like, came in and, you know, breathed new life into the series, really. I mean, I think that Crossroads of Twilight, and then, like, Winter's Heart and Path of Daggers, I think are, like, I don't know, Daniel, would you agree with me? Like, 8, 9, and 10 are probably, if there's a low point, it's probably
they are the
low
point, but they're still good. I only defend them as much as I will say they are good. They are not nearly as bad as, like, some people say. But yeah, Book 10, Knife of Dreams, is debatably not my favorite, but a lot of people would say Robert Jordan's best Wheel of Time book.
It's really good.
It's fantastic. And then that's when Sanderson took over. And Sanderson did it. He also had, Robert Jordan's widow working with him, but he did an incredible job finishing the series. I still maintain, despite my criticism of Sanderson, it might be the most impressive feat I've ever seen an author do. Finishing someone else's epic is in a really good way to do.
Like he had a bunch of notes, but dude, I mean, he did such a good job. Like, I mean, I would say personally, if we really want to get into it, I think I like Robert Jordan's writing personally more than Brandon Sanderson's.
Yeah.
But that's not to say Brandon Sanderson isn't a good writer. I just think that Jordan's descriptions are better. Like his pacing, his line to line is just better. Like, and maybe it's just because he's working in the world that he feels the most comfortable in, or whatever. Daniel, I'm curious though, what's your favorite Wheel of Time book?
Memory of Light right now, but it bounces around a bit. I actually think the first 3 books are a really fun combination on reread, because it goes from basically retelling Fellowship of the Ring to being a heist chase story and then an epic fantasy. And so it kind of is this big mood shift for the first 4 books. Because the 4th book is the first real Wheel of Time scale book. That's when it becomes Aiel, Shan Chan, fully exploring the cultures, really getting into it. You meet those cultures before, but you really get into them at that point. And it begins feeling on that other level. But this, I actually wanted to ask you, Lino, if you don't mind, there's always we as fantasy fans, we have 1,000 epics staring us in the face that demand to be read. Which are the ones that intimidate you the most, and which are the ones you're maybe just you can't do it? Is there any that have just repulsed you?
I feel like my answers are pretty typical, and it brings me peace and solace to know that other people experience this, that there's at least 1 or 2 series out there that you just may never get to because the intimidation factor or just the buy-in that's going to be required to get through it all. Wheel of Time is up there, but it's the most likely that I will read.
Okay.
But the hardest one I've had getting to, just
mostly
because a lot of people have given so many warnings about it. And it's okay, I don't want to be.
It's been around for
books.
A while. It's been time for people to critique.
Yeah, there's a lot of time. But the longer I go on as an avid reader and even a creator in this space, it's I'm getting further and further away from a lot of the early recommendations. So I forget a lot of the things that people said about it. So I'm getting closer to be able to just dive in and just see what happens. The other one's probably going to be the Malazan series. I've been kind of trying to decide if I'm ever going to do it, but
do it.
That one might be, if Wheel of Time is the most likely, Malazan might be the least likely as far as ones I'm going to get into. But I can be convinced. I never say never. But those are kind of the main 2 as far as epic fantasy series that actually intimidate me. And I'm even after reading The Way of Kings as my first fantasy novel, epic fantasy, I'm still okay, am I really going to be able to keep up with what the hell's going on in those series? But we'll see what happens. I'm getting closer and closer to that starting line. But are there any series like that left for y'all? I mean, the way I kind of see y'all's inventory, I feel like you guys have read so much.
I have a couple that. Go ahead, Daniel.
No, sorry. I was going to say I actually felt that way about Discworld before I got into it, because I didn't understand how bingeable they were and how small they were. But someone told me it was 30 books, and I was like, "What the what? I can't do that." But you can do a Discworld book in a weekend. The one that I kind of this is gonna be horrible to say. The one I regret putting the energy into, and because I just don't feel like I got enough out, is I don't know if I want to say this. It's gonna make people mad. I don't want to make.
Well, now you have to. Say
yes, you do.
God damn it. I love the Dresden Files. Don't get me wrong. I at its best, the Dresden Files is amazing. The last 3 books I have just had zero interest in, and I feel like it's jumped the shark in a way. Because it went from being these cool wizard detective stories to now it's world-ending stakes all the time, and I don't like it as much. But then they did release Jim Butcher released a smaller little detective tale, but because of everything that's happened in the story, it just feels inappropriate. And so, as a fan now, I'm kind of just it's just not anymore. But the one that I actually did just bounce off of because it's too long is The Wandering Inn. It's 15 million words. It's bigger than Stormlight, Malazan, Wheel of Time, Lord of the Rings, and a few others put together. I just can't
What
do
is
it.
this?
It's a progression
indie.
fantasy lit RPG, and the author streams himself writing it every day, and it's got an incredible following.
Yeah, people really love it.
But I can't commit to like how that would be like a year for me, like of my channel doing Wandering In content. Like I just there's
change
no
the name
way.
of the channel. Yeah.
The Wandering Goblin. And it's actually like I criticized the hell out of the first volume, which was the first volume was longer than I think the first two Stormlight books. Like it's not together, but it's like it's bigger than Way of Kings. But at the same time, like if I could be a reader who didn't have to pay that close of attention, could just be like gaming and having a book on and like not taking notes, I would love the Wandering In, because it's like a comfy snack food that you can just have on in the background, and it's like just a person running an inn. But if I'm sitting there taking notes and the main character for 10 chapters is doing nothing, which is the case in the first 10 chapters, I go insane because I have 10 chapters or notes that are nothing. So it's, I wish I could get into it, but I can't.
I'm going to have to at least check it out, because that honestly sounds like the most bizarre thing I've ever heard of in my life. So that's piqued my interest. So you've traded at least. You've subbed out and you brought one person in. So it's a net neutral.
In the first 10 hours of the audiobook, the main character cuts open their own hand, vomits, lets someone in, and passes out, and doesn't find out anything about why they're suddenly in this inn. Well, that's the thing. That's not even a spoiler. That's just someone doing chores.
That's just stuff happening.
It's just chores for 10 hours. Yeah. But I wanted to ask, is there, you said the one that you're like most likely to do, the one that you're like kind of just never going to do. Is there one that's like in the chamber for you, or is there like, you're not in the, because you're doing Wind of Truth. So you could say like you're in the middle of one, but is there a epic after, or are you going to do some palette cleanser light stuff?
Let's see. I mean, Empire of Silence, that's, I guess, not epic fantasy, but there's a ton of books there in the Sun Eater series, and that's loaded up for me this year. All of Joe Abercrombie's work, just all of it.
Whoa, you haven't read any of it?
I've read the first two books of
First Law.
The First Law trilogy. I have the third one left. And I'm just gonna read everything else. I freaking love those books, man.
He's so
those
good.
books are so
He's like
good.
my favorite fantasy author. I mean,
it just feels like it's like, and I can't even exactly explain it because I'm not confident in recommending it to other people that they're gonna love it, because I feel a little crazy with how much I love the book. Like,
yeah.
I got out of the.
Dude, I don't think you're crazy, man. I don't think anybody like this might be like a pretty bold take, but I really don't think anyone writes fantasy like Abercrombie, man. Like I really. His voice is second to none. Like I think that the way he zooms in on those characters, like he changes his syntax, man. Like he's changing like everything about how each chapter is written, depending on which character's head you're inside of. And like, I just, man,
it's freaking magical. There's like two authors that I think, as far as what I've read, I've only read so much. I just really started avidly reading fantasy and sci-fi and these things in the past maybe 2-3 years. But from everything I've read so far, there's him and then there's Robin Hobb. And those are like, I cannot put the words together to express how incredible I think their writing is. Even leaving the story and the characters behind, just like reading the words that they put on the page, that experience is unmatched besides those two authors.
I don't know what it is that Hobb does, man. Like, cause like she's like I read the Tawny Man trilogy last year, and so much of it handled by another author, I feel like would be so boring.
Yeah.
Like the second book, not to spoil too much, but like the second book in Tawny Man is just Fitz talking about what he's thinking about. Like he just goes into Buckheap Town, he comes back to the castle, and he's just piling on stresses like the entire book, And it is interesting, but like and even in the beginning of Fool's Errand, it's like there's so much of him just sitting in the forest, basically, and it's just every paragraph. Like every single it's just like nom 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 nom. I just
want more. I was like, I don't care that they're not. And I would say, some people probably find Robin Hobb's work boring. Maybe they think, there's not enough going on in it.
Those
I'm
people
on the
are
third book. I'm on
Fitz.
I'm on Assassin's Quest and had to put it down a little bit because I was like, okay, this has just been nonstop sadness for a long time. But
yeah, poor Fitz.
I will go back, and I'm excited to go back one day and finish everything because the writing, no matter how I felt about how the story was going or what the characters were doing, whether they were doing much at all, I was like, I could just read these words on this page over and over again and just continue to be amazed.
They're so real. All of her characters are so freaking real. Like
speaking
the things
of, I'm sorry, speaking of In the Chamber, you know, have you heard she's got like 3 books apparently like done almost? She's about to have a rapid fire release. She announced it at Dragonsteel, and I'm so excited. And yes, I agree with everything you guys said. And the proof is no one has written an idiot as engaging to follow as Fitz is.
The real fool Fitz. Yeah. Man, he definitely else. I think that's why like I love him. I mean, because obviously I think that there's a fine line because typically you don't want to see a character make a mistake that drives the plot forward, you know, just to drive the plot forward, right? When it's like, okay, obviously it would be a really terrible idea if you did, oh, look at him doing that, you know, like, of course, because it sets all of this up. But I don't think that Hobb really does that. It's like, because Fitz is such a realized, like, real person with these flaws that she definitely covers her tracks with. Like,
Fitz feels too real. I feel like at one point really Robin Hobb knew like a ranch hand or something that was just a total idiot. And she just started writing like what this guy did.
Well, like a lot of what Fitz does, like you can track it to like ways that he's felt about certain situations or ways that he's been traumatized. Mm-hmm. You know, like, I mean, it's not just him being like, oh, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to do this. Like, it's not really that. It's like he's been just, oh my God, he's just been beaten into the mud so many times, like in so many different ways.
Yeah. And there's like always this moment where I feel like he has like, there's like just a split second where he can reach out and grab a life raft and get out of the situation that's going to happen. And there's just something that distracts him or something that pops up or the life raft shifts just a little bit to the left to where he misses it. And then all hell breaks loose for the next 5 chapters. And you were like, you were so close. You were so close to making this all so much easier. And it's just incredible.
I'm curious, you're about to do an Abercrombie binge. Are you going to stop to pick up The Devils when it comes out? Or
I think so. Because is that a first book? Like I've seen it. It's the first book. I might as well just knock it out and then go do everything else while I'm there. But the main priority is to read The Last Argument of Kings, knock that out. Best Served Cold is another one that I'm really excited for. And then I know he has like another trilogy. Yeah. And so
he's got Red Country too. So like there's the First Law trilogy, and then I can't remember exactly what the order is for the 3 standalones. I don't know if there even is an order, but yeah, it's Best Served Cold, The Heroes, and Red Country, and then Age of Madness. But there's also a short story collection. What's it called? Sharp Ends? Is
that what it's called? Think so. I think I've seen that. I've seen that title somewhere.
Oh, you haven't read? Have you read all of the other stuff though, Daniel? Yeah,
except I like Age of Madness YA series, which it still blows my mind that he has a YA series.
I read the first book, so curious, and then I read like half of the second one, and I just like couldn't really get into it. Fair. I don't know. I think he wrote it like maybe I could be so freaking wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure he wrote those YA books like pretty fast.
Okay.
Like over like a vacation or something like that. Like I could be misremembering. But I'm excited to hear your thoughts about Abercrombie and like excited because I know what's ahead of you now, and you got some stuff ahead of you.
Man, oh my gosh!
I feel like it's the perfect time to give you a plug right now because if all these stuff you're about to go through, there's nothing more magical as a viewer than seeing someone go through a book you love for the first time. And so if people want to follow you, we'll have all your links, of course, in the description. Please go support more creators. Are you writing as well? I've been meaning to ask you that. Are you getting into the writing space?
I've been writing a little bit of something. I put together this whole outline for this novel, and I was like, I have to stop because I need to figure out a way to make this not just a rewrite of The Spear Cuts Through Water, because I got to the end of it. I was like, this is the same freaking book.
No way.
So,
hey man, that's a cool bar to shoot for though.
Yeah, but it probably wouldn't be as good. And so I was like, I need to figure out what I'm trying to do, like what the point of this is and what I want to be differently.
In what way? Like, I mean, are you messing with different, like, second person, third person, first person type mixtures, or are you doing? Is it more like this? I mean, one thing I really loved about Spirit Cuts Through Water was like just all the I would call it like soft world building, where it's just like there's not really a ton of explanation for why things like why there's like a talking turtle that guards these like outposts and stuff, but it is there, and so is that kind of like
the premise of the story is essentially, it's mostly the narrative thing. The writing style would probably be very different. I don't think I would write that way, and the different perspectives is probably not a task I'm trying to tackle in my first novel by any means. But the narrative was mostly going to follow these two boys who come from this village that the resources in the villages are dwindling because of a ritual that's not been fulfilled in the past 100 years. Every 100 years, someone actually has to go on a journey and take all the people who've died in that village, take their ghosts to this like resting place, which is across this desert. And no one's done it in a few years. And since that's been the case, the village is pretty much like haunted and like doesn't grow crops, and like things like random disasters keep happening. And so these two boys who are not very friendly towards each other get elected to go on this journey. And they have to go through all these trials and tribulations to get across and deliver essentially these ghosts who in certain circumstances can help them through the journey or hinder them, kind of just depending on how they died and like how their spirit feels about being stuck, and whether they want to be stuck, whether they don't want to be stuck. And so they're having these issues, or they're being helped, and they're running into all these problems, and then they get to the other side, and then there's going to be a whole thing. And so I was writing all the things that I wanted to happen, and then I got to the end of that, and I was like, did I just rewrite the Spirit Cuts Through Water?
So I don't want to tell you like how to feel, but I wouldn't worry like too much about it.
Yeah, Terry Brooks wrote Sword of Shadowrun, which is Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I mean, you're fine.
One thing I remember when I was playing music and we were like writing songs and stuff, we would get in our own heads sometimes and be like, oh, does this sound too much like the Strokes? Like, does this sound, and it's like, dude, no, it doesn't. Okay. Like, you're not writing a fucking Strokes song right now. Cause if you were, you'd be the Strokes, and you're not, and so like, that's just like a thing that I always wanted to like tell myself, especially with like writing and with anything you're creating. It's like, there's always like that feeling of like, oh my God, am I ripping this off? And it's like, you can always draw lines to things, like there's all kinds of different things. But I mean, the plot does, like, I won't lie to you. Like, it does sound similar in the sense that there's like, these two people that are kind of like not really stoked on each other, and they've got to transport, something. I don't want to give away the
water. I highly recommend anybody listening definitely read that one, because it's
so
sick.
Cool. But also, you're you, and you're not Simon Jimenez. And like your ideas are going to come through in small ways while you're working on the capital P plot that are going to be much different than Spirit Cuts Through Water, which will probably lead you to a different resolution. You've had different life experiences. You think about things differently than Simon Jimenez. So you'll just kind of naturally end up there. And at least that's my optimistic view. I mean, unless you've like got a copy of Spirit Cuts Through Water like on your desk.
Then I'm just that looks pretty good. Let's do that.
Yeah, next. I wouldn't do that. But,
I wanted to just second what he said. Like, absolutely, because like my book Better Dead I'm writing right now. I wanted to write Lost but better, because I rewatched Lost and I was mad at how dumb and bad it was.
I'm watching Lost for the first time right now, so I want to put a pin in that. Like, so please go on, Daniel. But
fair.
I wanted.
Just Evan, be prepared for no answers.
Dude, I am not stoked on this show.
Amazing pilot.
Actively dislike
dumpster
it.
Fire afterward.
Yeah, go ahead.
But and so but it's become something that's like not like that at all. Like it's now about someone finding religion, even though I'm not religious. I really wanted to explore that idea. Your book will change as you write it, like exponentially so. And on top of that, I want to emphasize, it's fine to wear your influences on your sleeve. I think that is from Star Wars to Brandon Sanderson to Christopher Rocchio, like all of them do. And it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, Christopher Rocchio was like, this is just another Star Wars. Like, these are actually just...
But like the small parts that he fits in, like I bet Christopher Rocchio has scenes that are his. And he has resolutions that are his because of those scenes that are his. Like maybe there are these big kind of overarching like I've never read Sun Eater, but is there like a
It's really just the
rebel faction
lightsabers. He
trying-
was like, I literally just wanted lightsabers in my story, so I
It's
have
never-
them here.
I want swords in mine. What does George R. R. Martin have a monopoly on swords and horses?
I would say it's not Star Wars aside from the lightsabers. I would say it's Dune. Like it is
Yeah.
Dune.
Oh,
It's
okay.
the man who accidentally ruined the universe by trying to fix it, kind of thing.
I dig that though.
Yeah,
That's
and
cool.
which is like,
It's
yeah,
sick.
okay, I want to see Dune again because Dune's awesome.
Give me more Dune, actually.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
But then he adds in xenomorphs that are orcs, and then he adds in super like Roman politics esque stuff, even more so than Dune. And the end result is something that he also. I have a weird. I'll even call it a fetish, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. Where like if you take like stuff from our time and make it like mythos in the future, I think that's so fucking cool. I love that. I love that Robert Jordan did it with like talking about the space race and stuff. In Wheel of Time is like talk about like mythology from the past because Wheel of Time is Earth. Christopher Rocchio does the same thing, and I don't want to spoil it, but they like find something we launched into space in our lifetimes, and I'm like, that's the thing. But like, it's a comedy scene because they come across like its version of AI, which is like Siri, right? And they're trying to get it to behave like their AI, and so they're like, do this, and the Siri's like, I can't help you with that, and they're like, what is? And they start being like, is this a disabled AI? Like, what is this? This is the most infuriating thing ever.
Wow. I can't wait to get to that.
That's
That
really
sounds
cool
awesome.
to hear that you're writing, man. Like, like Daniel said, just to pile on just a little bit of like wearing your influences on your sleeve and just trust the process and know that like your outline, your first draft, your second draft, like it's all just gonna, it's in a constant state of shitty flux that eventually becomes not very shitty flux. That
Just
becomes
don't
kind
publish it before it becomes not very shitty. That's a big
the
mistake.
goal for sure. That would definitely be not great.
like give it to people and be like, tell me if this is shitty. Like,
yeah.
please.
Absolutely. Well, I'll definitely be knocking on your door soon whenever I get that finished. It's been a tall task for sure. Very different to kind of like open up my brain because I went to school for writing, creative writing. I wrote poetry, and I have a few poetry collections like published.
Wow.
That whole journey was just so different than what this one is like adding up to be. It just feels like a completely different sport, honestly.
Yeah.
But it's been fun.
Have you noticed anything about the process of putting a book together that you like weren't really expecting? Like any difficulties that kind of came up and like worried you a little bit?
At the stage I'm at, there's definitely a lot more like preparation and outlining and scene building that is just not as like there's so many gaps that you might leave in a poetry collection that's just like I have these
fucking plotters. Ugh.
Yeah. I can't wrap my brain around it without it. Like my pen won't even touch the paper without knowing what the hell we're supposed to be talking about. And so with poetry, it was so much easier because a poem would come to me, and then as I wrote more poems throughout the year, I was like, okay, there's kind of a theme to what I've been feeling and what I've been thinking about lately. Let me write some more stuff that helps kind of tie all this together. And then let's package this up into one collection for everybody to read. And some of my collections have had like narratives behind them, but most of them have kind of just been anthologies of however many years of poems I've been writing or themes. And so this is just starkly different than that, in that I'm telling a fictional story that is got dialogue and world building in a way that I have to be very deliberate about and going to have to harken back to and not just change in the middle. So too many rules and laws in this, but it's been fun so far.
It's a lot
what
of
would you say is your first law? No. Okay. That was horrible. I'm so sorry. That was bad.
All right. So thank you guys for coming on.
No, I mean, it's all beautiful to hear. I'd love to review your book someday. So get that done, and Evan and I will do a podcast about it. It'll be a lot of fun. Evan will get a lot of views by claiming it's just a ripoff. And
no, do it to the moon.
I don't want to farm views with negativity.
No, I'm just gonna say it's like it's clearly a ripoff of American Werewolf in London. It's the same story. No, But yeah, I want to say thank you for coming on and being willing to ramble with us for an hour and a half.
Oh,
So much fun talking about
me.
books. I could do
This
it
was a
for
blast.
6 hours straight if I didn't have
Same.
to eat.
All right. Well, all the links will be in the description and in the pinned comment. I'm going to go watch Witch actually with my neighbor because he hasn't seen it. So wish me luck. What, Evan, do we have a more formal outro? How do we end these things?
No, I just hit record and I'll just stop recording.
See you.
There
Perfect.
it is.
That was it.
Goodbye, everybody.